Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Penelope Rose Nasruddin, and I am the program manager of the Gilder-Coigney International Theatre Forum, or the GCITF, a project of the New Perspectives Theatre Company. Before we begin, I want to thank our partners at HowlRound Theatre Commons for hosting today's conversation and helping us bring this discussion to an international audience. In many ways, this gathering began 5 years ago during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the time, I was just beginning my journey with New Perspectives Theatre Company as an intern and had the privilege of serving as project coordinator for Theatre from the Streets. Theatre from the Streets was an international series that brought together theatre artists from around the world to discuss censorship, authoritarianism, political unrest, identity, and artistic survival. What we discovered was that even when artists were separated by oceans, languages, cultures, and borders, they were often experiencing remarkably similar challenges. We also discovered something else. Artists wanted to connect with one another. That realization helped inspire the creation of the Gilder-Coigney International Theatre Forum, a space dedicated to artist-to-artist connection, collaboration, conversation, and activism across borders. I stepped into the role of program manager this January, and I am incredibly proud that this is our first official GCITF panel. We wanted to begin this series in Hungary because we felt this was an important moment to listen. The artists joining us today have spent years creating work under difficult political and cultural conditions. They have navigated questions of artistic freedom, public funding, resistance, care, labor, and community. Their experiences matter, not only to Hungary, but to all of us. One of the lessons from Theatre from the Streets was that artists separated by oceans, cultures, languages, and borders often find themselves confronting remarkably similar challenges. Conversations like this remind us that we are connected to one another and that there is much we can learn. Here in the United States, we are now experiencing an unprecedented assault on artistic freedom, education, cultural institutions, and public discourse. For that reason, it feels especially important to learn from artists who have spent years navigating the same. After today's conversation, I encourage you to explore the work of these artists. Visit New Perspectives Theatre Company, check out Theatre from the Streets archives on YouTube, and join the Gilder-Coigney International Theatre Forum. Membership is completely free. Our mission is to engage international theater women and their allies, scholars, students, activists, and artists from around the world to participate in this critical conversation. Thank you all for being here. And now, it is my pleasure to turn things over to our moderator, Dr. Eniko Suches.
Hi, hello and welcome all, and thank you so much to all of you for being here. First, I would also like to express my gratitude to the New Perspective Theatre Company, to the HowlRound Theatre, HowlRound platform, to Penelope Nasruddin, Linda Chapman, and Melody Brooks. I think we all are really excited to be here. And I also want to thank the artists who joined us tonight. I'll be really short since we only have an hour for this panel. I'll quickly describe how the evening will look. I will very briefly introduce each of the artists, and then we're going to start our conversation. So we will have two different panels. The first one has the title Performance as a Site of Feminist Resistance. And we are planning to have this conversation going on for an hour. We will have 4 artists that I will introduce to you in a second. The plan is to have, I guess, 4 questions that I've prepared for this event. But as I expressed to the artists, I'm also very open to transform this event to a roundtable as much as we can under the Zoom circumstances. And then we're going to take a short break. It's going to be about a 10-minute break, and we will have a second panel that will focus on more focus on companies. I put it that way, with the title Care as Practice, Labor, Community, and Artistic Precarity. So I'll quickly introduce each of the artists, and I will ask that as I call your name, please turn on your camera so that our audiences know who you are. And I'll just go in alphabetical order. So our first artist is Zsófi Rebecca Kozma, who is a performance artist, theater maker, and organizer based in Budapest. She believes that theater can serve as a space to highlight social inequalities and ignite change. She collaborates with people from different backgrounds, including trade unions, social movements, and social scientists. Her most recent show, 115 this is Swedish krona per hour was premiered as her degree project at the Malmö Theatre Academy in Sweden at the Performing Arts as Critical Practice Master's Program. She also holds a degree from CUNY Hunter College and attended the Free SFS Society's Performance Art and Theatre course, which was truly fantastic. Our second artist is Pani Nader, is a Hungarian theater director, writer, and performer, trained at the University of Theatre and Film in Budapest and the Ernst Busch Ernst Busch University for Theater Arts in Berlin. She is working as a freelance multidisciplinary artist, developing documentary and autobiographical performances that interweave text, physical theater, video, and music. Her Berlin debut piece, When Was the Last Time You Had Sex on Top of a Mountain, has received multiple awards and continues to tour internationally. The third artist is Veronika Szabó, and Veronika is a freelance actor, director, clown, and theater lecturer. She graduated at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, London, studying physical theater and contemporary theater practices. She was a member of the London Clown School, and since 2019, she has been a member of the Red Nose International Clown Network. Her theater performances include War Paint, Kish Baba, which is Baby, The Time Stealers, Queendom, Animal City, Dino Coming Out, Candlelit Dinner, Sirens, and most recently, and Veronika, please correct me if I'm wrong, Kingdom. She works around topics of gender identity and likes breaking the fourth wall, creating playful, grotesque, and visceral shows, often inviting the audience to play. She's a theater lecturer in the performance and theater program at Free SFF. And last but not least, the fourth performing artist is Mikol Tozsa, who is a performer and theater maker whose work explores the intersections of theater, politics, and everyday life. A graduate of the Theater and Performance Program of Free SFL Association, she creates participatory performances that invite audiences to engage as active contributors rather than passive spectators. She is a co-founder of the National Performance Theater Collective. Her solo performance, God, Homeland, and Kitchen, has been presented at leading national and international festivals, including the Hungarian city Szeged, Timisoara in Romania, Ostrava, Berlin, and Trenčín. So thank you for being here. Welcome. And I know that I very briefly introduced all of you, and I do want to emphasize that on the website of this program, I think it's going to be the New Perspective Theater, but Penny, correct me if I'm wrong, there will be longer bios too, if anyone is interested. But my first question is actually tied into your bios, because I thought that we should really start by asking you to a little bit introduce yourselves. Now, what I mean by this introduction is that what do you think the audience should know about your work, about your artistic explorations, or about a performance or two, so that we can better understand as we start to discuss the specific work conditions and the work that you've done during the past 16 years. So for this first question, I will just sort of like stick with the alphabetical order, and then we're going to start to of course, jump around, or if one of you have something to say, feel free to jump in. Really, I would strongly encourage you. So Sophie, with that said, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So hello, it's really nice to be here and to be able to have this conversation, and really thank you for everyone who pulled all this together. So yes, I'm sorry about my cat. She wants to be part of the conversation. So I am a performance maker and performer, and so I make performances where the audience is usually involved in interactive ways, in playful ways, and I'm interested in creating shows that have a stake, not just on the stage, but in real life, so that it has an effect on the audience and who are watching the shows. And I, for example, in this last performance that I made, it was about the labor exploitation among migrant and non-migrant workers in Sweden, it was mainly about the role of the state and trade unions. And I used a research process that involved speaking to researchers, to people with lived experiences, and putting material together, documentary material together, using the stories of the people that I interviewed with, and also the role of the embedded artist, as I am very curious when an artist goes into a specific environment and also gets experience themselves about the topic that they're making a performance about, and what it can do to the effect of the performance, but also I'm interested in adapting this performance to different contexts. For example, I did it also in the Netherlands with a different approach to the research, and yeah, I'm really interested in making changes that are very specific and small, that can be maybe manageable if there is someone in the audience who has power over certain topics or certain things. And then one last thing that I would mention is that I started developing my method of data visualization on stage, which I used in this performance, where I explore adding a larger context and using sociological research to personal experiences. And I combine these two aspects, the personal and then the larger context. So
thank you so much.
That's...
Okay, Pani.
Hi, everybody. I'm Pani Neder, and thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm basically trained as a theater director, but I'm an author and performer as well. And I started my career in Hungary in the repertory system, so the state system. But after moving to Berlin 15 years ago, it became a wider spectrum. So basically, I'm a freelance artist here, but sometimes I do work in Hungary on audiovisual projects, and here in Berlin on theater performances, site-specific shows, political satire. So it's a wide range, I would say. And the show that you mentioned, Aniko, when was the last time you had Sex on Top of a Mountain? We just had 2 performances yesterday and the day before in Dresden. And yeah, it's a very special show to me and my artistic credo, so to say, because it's based on the experience being a migrant, you know, in a different country. And I wrote the text on 14 different languages, back then with the helping hands of Google Translate. And I thematized socio-cultural fears, but very personal fears as well. So it's 100% autobiographical, but a very political show as well. And it was quite special because that was the first show in Dresden, you know, after the Hungarian elections. And a huge part of this show, I mean, you know, we were just occupied by the topic of Viktor Orbán's regime. And, you know, it was quite difficult before that. I mean, I'm very happy, you know, about the results of the Hungarian elections, but then what can I do with my show? I mean, is it becoming old school? But then I realized, although, you know, that fact is very positive in Hungary, but we cannot rewrite, you know, the damage and the measure of hopelessness, you know, which this regime has caused. So yeah, it was a very special experience to me. And basically, I'm doing very political and personal and radical, honest projects, but it's very important to me. I mean, how can we connect the people and not divide them anymore with a sense of humor and, you know, deep emotional touch. And another, and I'm planning to continue this show, so to make the second part, because when I wrote the first one, it was 10 years ago. I was younger, the word was different, and so that's the next plan. And another project, which is only 1 year old, it's called Freiheit Tours. Freiheit means freedom in English. And I'm doing that with a Hungarian colleague of mine, Mátyás Tóth, and it's a political satirical show, and we are performing as two loyal officers under the Fidesz regime, and it's kind of agitprop thing, but we are using the authoritarian language of the Fidesz. And I think this position, it's becoming quite interesting as well, because Fidesz is not there anymore, as the biggest party in Hungary. But what is happening worldwide with this autocracy, I think we have to do a lot more. And we are teaching the people abroad, how to do that in the Hungarian propagandistic way. And we're gonna have a new show in July. So these are the current things.
Thank you. Okay, I'm taking so many notes. We might come back to many of the sort of like thoughts and projects that you're mentioning. Veronica.
Good evening, everybody. I'm also very happy to be here, and thanks so much for organizing this and listening to us tonight. I haven't updated so much my bio, so maybe I do it now. So in the last 2.5 years, I also founded my own theater company with an actor colleague of mine, Attila Lestján, which was very much also reacting, I think, on the current situations in Hungary, because we made a company called the Seven Rehearsal Company or Seven Trial Company, and our idea was and still is that we would like to try to make shows based only on 7 rehearsal. So it's very economical and also a lot of fun to be in this obstacle, because usually we are not used to work in such a short period, but we kind of wanted to force ourselves, first of all, not to take ourselves too seriously, and also not to believe only in polished performances that are not taking risks. And secondly, also because the financial situation didn't allow us to make all the time big shows. So this is one of the things I do, and with Attila we made recently our last show, which was called the Sex at Cabaret. It's a mixture of sex education lecture and cabaret, based on a lot also some autobiographical things about our sexuality, but also trying to educate people on it. And this idea was based on the need that we felt young people really much need this show and to think about this topic. But that time we created the show, it was banned from the schools. So we kind of made an impossible mission, but we managed. I will maybe talk about it later, how. And the latest other show I did, which I have directed, it's with a group of men aged above 60, mixed with civilians and also professionals. And with them, we have worked on the topic of masculinity and vulnerability, and why is it so difficult for this generation of men to be emotionally available and to become vulnerable. And in all the shows I think I do, I really like playfulness and improvisation and structures that are allowing to be or to exist. And I think I also use a lot of clown and sometimes buffoon techniques, because I'm very much influenced by those two. And also because maybe I work as a clown doctor for many years. So I can also use often this background in my artistic or theatrical practice. And with the company, we really try to experiment with different kind of working methods, also to look at performance or theater as an event, and maybe sometimes using performative strategies for different things, maybe to make people network or to create a ritual. We have created our own artistic marriage, and also a second round of artistic marriages for those people who are trying to work together in the independent field. And we wanted to make this kind of statement that even though it's really difficult to run a company together or to hold on to each other or to count on finances or to make it sustainable, we still felt it's important to commit to something, maybe to each other only, and that's it. So we have created also this artistic marriage event, and we made a lot of artists to marry each other symbolically. So we kind of did this kind of performative events as well. And in the last 16 years or more, I had many legs. I have directed. Sometimes I worked as a choreographer in state theaters in Europe. I worked as a clown doctor. And
this is a question that I would like to come back later when we are talking about like how exactly did you work the past 16 years and the different ways in which the social political conditions.
So I'm not gonna go into this deep. Maybe then that's
like next round. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
next
you.
round. Thank you.
And Mikol?
Hi, my name is Mikol. Thank you for being here. I'm glad that I can be here with so many great performers. And yes, so I'm a performance theater maker and performer too. And yes, I create situations where the audience are part of the performance. They also shape the form of the performance, and I work with political and personal traumas. I'm exploring how the political processes affect our everyday life, and I also work with intimacy, physicality, the act of thinking, and also confrontation. And my themes emerge from the intersection of politics and everyday life, such as gender roles, inequalities, the forms of love, and the question of national identity. And my creative process is fundamentally collaborative. I consider my all participants as co-creators. Yes, and we build from collective research the performance. Yes, and currently I'm working on working with the memories of my grandfather from the front line in the Second World War, as well as the love letters written by my grandmother's fiancé, who was killed in the Second World War. I also have a picture for you about here. I can maybe, wait a second, I try to show, yeah.
Lower it,
so,
yeah. Great.
Yeah, like this. And in this work, I explore actually the impact of World War II on families and personal life today, and if still has any. Yeah, so this is my new project.
Thank you so much. And just a moment of bragging and celebration is that I sent an email to the artists and I really asked them to think about how they would answer this question and how they would answer it under 4 minutes. And I feel like you all did such an incredible job. And I'm so thankful because then we can, now we can continue and sort of like explore some of the very specifics of what it meant to, I think it's interesting because I'm looking at the four of you and truthfully, I think most of you became, well, actually half of you became an artist during this very autocratic regime or a regime that became or had become increasingly autocratic. And what I would ask you to reflect on now is very much like staying in the past for a second. And if you could give a sense to our international audiences of what was it like for you either to become an artist during these years, in what ways was it limiting for you, or what kind of conditions did you have to adapt to? And how it shaped basically your life, your aesthetics, and your own career. For instance, if you decided to leave, was there a connection there? Did it shape the performances that you created in any way? So I feel like anything that you can share with us in specific details would be very interesting. And now, again, we're going to go alphabetical order, but I'm going to reverse it. And I am going to start with Veronica, if that's okay with you.
Sure. It's a big question still what you're asking about, because I think we are all in the process of reflecting on it and still in grief. So a lot of things are just coming on the table, I guess, now. There are also some of our friends or artists in Hungary who are organizing these grief rituals, which helps or enables our bodies and the circle of these artists to try to first see what we have gone through, what we have lost, what we had to deal with, how was maybe even our hopes or fantasies completely limited, and and what are we going to do now with all this? One thing that comes to my mind for sure about myself, that actually I came back from London when the regime was already on, after finishing my studies. So that was already a time when it was the beginning still of the regime, the first, maybe the first end of the first part. So there was already a question in the air, should I come back or should I stay in London? A lot of people, of course, was telling me, why are you coming back? Why don't you stay? Etc. And I already felt back then that the way how I think I create, or the motivation behind creating something, for me, it's very much connected to my context. So who am I doing shows for? When I was in London, there was maybe a little bit of gate opening that maybe I can make shows for people living in London, or maybe I can even make shows for an international audience. And that was the time when I had my idea to create my first, let's say, bigger production, which was called Queendom, which was about the playfulness of identities or femininity and masculinity or queerness as well, but also the power of the male gaze. And that was an important moment for me to realize that I want to make this show in Hungary and not in London. And the reason why, because I think the point of view where I'm talking from, it's more talking to those people who were growing up in my context. So that was a big call for me to come back, even though I knew I might come back to something or a country which will not support so much these kind of ideas or the way how I think of theater. Already when I was applying for my first funding for this show, it was not really clear or sure if I'm going to get this. There was already questions about the decision-making process of the Board of Trustees. But I decided to come back and stay, and still I'm here. I never left after that, only for a couple of works abroad. What I felt, but this is very personal, and I think we are all different how we cope with crisis. For me, it might sound, I don't know, maybe I'm too much allowing the regime to inspire me, but it did make me think of different ways. So if this regime maybe is not on, maybe I never make a company of 7 rehearsals. I don't know. These are questions still in the air. But I do think that, of course, even there are hundreds of obstacles, financial, artistic, cultural, many. We were full of obstacles. Of course, these can still give food for artists. So this is a good thing about being an artist, maybe, to survive this kind of regimes. That artists will find another way, thinking out of the box, maybe. I'm not saying I was always so enthusiastic about thinking out of the box. Sometimes I just wanted to be maybe supported fully. but I did my tricks. I took some risks. There was an application I applied for the sex education cabaret under a project in the funding bodies, which was focusing on family and how to create home and family in a conservative way. I took my risk. I did this application, and it was not really mentioning fully the truth. And I said, okay, this is my strategy. I will apply with this application, which is not fully telling the truth, but I still believe in my truth and in my values that this country or these young people or this audience here in Hungary needs a show about sexual education, not because of only creating families, but for other reasons too. And the application won. Maybe because it included the right keywords. I'm still not sure. So this was one strategy I chose. And then there was the next episode in the story that, okay, we won the application, but we want to bring this show to young people who are still in school, but the topic is banned from school. So what are we going to do? We have collaborated with teachers, with curators, and we find a way sometimes to perform the show outside of the school. So we always had to find these little gates and strategies to be able to do actually still the work which I believe in. Yeah.
This is such an important reflection, because one of the questions that I now regularly receive, even in the States, is how do you work around these different kind of processes that do feel like, and they are actually censorships, and you are actually presenting such a great example of it. I also wanted, just for the audience, so this applying for grants, well, Hungary for such a long time, of course, I'm talking about communists, it has a history of state support. Art was supported by the state, and something that has been extremely challenging during the past 30 years, that there is this slow transition where the state was, of course, providing less and less for the arts. But what happened, and this is what I would describe as illiberal precarity, is that the state continued to provide grants for those who it deemed worthy of their attention and worthy of their money. And I think it's really fascinating what you're saying about like sort of like writing the right grant in order to get the money. And it is also a reflection, that's something that I wanted to point out to our audience, is that those who were deciding on which artists should get this money knew probably so little about the arts or who these applicants were. It was like only sheer, like it was sheer ideological awards. So if the right catchwords are there, as Veronica was describing, then the project is deemed financial support from the state, which of course is quite unique. Mikko, I'm going to ask you next, because you also have a lot of experience in developing projects in Hungary.
Yeah, and what is the question exactly? I'm sorry.
So the question is like, so how did the past 16 years shape your experiences? What were some of the limitations? How did it shape you as an artist, as well as your artistic practice? And again, very specific challenges that you might have had, specific decisions that you might have had to make because of the social political conditions in which you try to create art.
Yeah, okay, so I created my first work actually in the last circle of the Orbán government, in highly tense political and cultural environment. And already the training which I did, the artist training, was the result of the illiberal functioning of the government, because the audience might know about this, but then I'm going to mention that there was an illiberal restructuring of the University of Theatre and Film Arts in Budapest, and it caused a huge rupture in arts education, but it also led to the creation of the Free SF Association's theater and performance course, and I did my training there. And this was really special because there was performance education in Hungary never before. So it was a really great shift in perspective within theater education. And it was really difficult to do this training already, also as a student and also for teachers, because we had no support, of course, and the teachers and the new association had no support at all, and it was relied almost entirely on our enthusiasm. So I started as an emerging artist my career already in in a very difficult situations, because the venues and institutions were already on or almost in progress. They were closing down, or they transformed their functioning towards survival-based functioning, and there were so the venues for public public demonstrations for us were radically cut down, and of course the independent freelancers were not supported from this government, and yeah, so it was almost impossible to start a career in this environment. So that was the biggest challenge for me, to keep up and believe that it will change, and it's worth to not to stop right in the beginning. Yeah.
And you know what, this is something that I'm going to ask you like in a second, very specifically, because I think that, again, something really interesting for the international audience is to hear like how did you specifically achieve like these successes, or how, like, what kept you going, and how could you keep going? And I mean, you have an absolutely fantastic performance that has been very successful. So again, I'm gonna ask Pani to reflect now, but we're gonna come back because we would love to hear more about this.
Yeah, so my situation is a bit special because I'm in Berlin, or I have been in the past 15 years between Berlin and Budapest, I would say. But when I got my diploma back then, so that was the first year of the Fidesz regime, that was the beginning. So that was not the cause, because of why I left Hungary. But years later, it has had a strong impact to me why I don't want to go back to Hungary. And how I socialized, that was a completely different system. I mean, regarding money, fundings, artistic freedom, no nepotism and whatsoever. And I think what Veronica mentioned as well, the grief and, what have we lost and what have changed. I mean, in this 16 years, yeah, I'm still processing, and, I have to analyze all of that. But I became very strongly political in my arts in Berlin, because I've learned here, that my voice is important, and I can raise that, and I can be more, I don't know, sharp and confrontative, which was, not the artistic fact in Hungary, I would say. So I've organized many things in and from Berlin, and I found my sharp political voice here, and my performances became more political as well. But it's also an important fact that many people asked me in the past years, how can I handle the censorship regarding my personality in Hungary? And I think maybe I was quite naive, because I thought, what kind of censorship? I mean, many small companies are dying there or are just in a survival modus. So not a big surprise that I cannot work there. But it's important then that 9 years ago, I was the first person in Hungary, and it was even before the Me Too movement, who thematized publicly the power of abuse of the theatrical leader of one of the biggest theater houses in Hungary. And back then I was completely alone, so nobody supported me. It came 2 years later. And meanwhile, I was very critical with the Orbán regime as well, I mean, publicly. And nobody invited me to work in theaters in the past 9 years. And I think, those facts have a strong connection. And I'm sure because I've got an invitation to work in Hungary just 1 week ago. And the director said, finally, I can invite you again. So, then I realized, okay, it was still a censorship, or a kind of censorship regarding my personality. So, and what I mentioned is special because I'm not living fully in Hungary anymore, but I'm very connected, to the people, to the arts, and to the politics as well.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, I will have a follow-up question here too. I think it's really something as I'm listening to it, it keeps haunting. Well, the grief is one aspect of it, but the second one is this, it's almost a metaphorical question, and feel free to address it in the rest of the conversation or not, but it's so interesting to think about, would your life have been any different, or how your life would have been different had you had our home country where we were born and where we belong not had this sort of very radical and marginalizing politics. Okay, Zsófi, before we move on to the next question, tell us a little bit about your experiences.
Yeah, so I think I was 15 years old when the Orbán regime started, so it had the last years of my high school years I spent on the streets, protesting against the new higher education laws. So it already had it was a really turbulent time to be ending and finishing high school then, and kind of figuring out what you want to be doing and how. So I think that that was a really critical time to when this regime started to really systematically start what they ended up finishing now, and also kind of have this idea that you need to work, get married, get a mortgage, make children. If you're a woman, make more and more children, and it was not an ideal atmosphere for being an open-minded artist, and then so for me, I cannot say what effect it had on me going abroad so many times and coming back and going abroad and coming back. But then I can really relate to a lot of what Mikołaj was saying, because we were in the same course together, and which was a really transformative course for me as well. And I think that at that time we already knew what we were getting into, and I think that for me, what I realized is I was kind of going to residencies abroad, or I never I was always thinking of what it would mean for me to dream big, because I was always so constrained and never really dare to dream big, and then as I was reflecting on that, at first I was like, oh, big stage, a lot of people, a lot of money, whatever, but then I realized it's not really that, but it's more kind of taking some risks in the show and making it really have this effect of changing something. And I think that what really changed maybe now is that I couldn't even imagine maybe inviting politicians or decision makers to the shows ever, because I was like, wow, that cannot happen. But now maybe there is something that's changing in the atmosphere, and then this new dreams can become more true or something. Yeah, but it's hard to say what would be different, or if it hadn't been for this regime, because I really grew up with it, and it's something that it's part of my whole identity, to be on the opposition, to be so it's kind of a bit of losing my part of my identity now, as the others were saying, this grief and this looking for something new. But also, just one more thing, that I think what really meant a lot is the support of this community, and starting collective works, working together, and those were definitely survival strategies, and relying on each other, and also going abroad a lot. But that's tiring. Oh, and never being a full-time artist.
Oh yeah, yeah. Thank you. Okay, so we have about, I would say, 19 minutes left. That's the absolute max that we can have. So what I'm thinking now is that I am going to combine, we were going to have 2 more rounds of questions, which of course was very ambitious, and then we find kind of ourselves stuck in this like very sort of like I don't know, boring structure where we just keep going around and around. And I apologize for that. That is the limitation of a webinar, actually. But I would love to go back to Zsófi's like dream big. And so the last 2 questions were going to be on the reflections on like this sounds horrible, and I always push back so hard when I'm being asked this, that what good came out of it, because you know, I'm quite often being asked like what are, and there's this like specific word, this is a very theoretical term of like what are the generative potentials, so what can precarity create, what like again, what can vulnerability create, and I always, you know, I would very much sort of stay away of the fetishization of like it's so beautiful to be marginalized and oppressed and whatnot. But I did want to touch upon, and you have already touched upon sort of like some of like what you actually got from these very extreme but also very inspiring experiences. So where I would like to end this conversation today is this like the question of dream big, and so how do you think your identity as an artist and your work as an artist could be different in the coming years? And what are some of your aspirations, both for yourself, but for your community, and and your community can be local Hungarian, it can be more transnational. So it's really up to you. And anyone wants to jump in so that we break with the structure a little bit? Well, then I'm just going to ask Pani. You go first.
Okay, I'm sorry, can you repeat the questions? I mean,
yes,
how
so sort of going back to the dreams and aspirations, as well as what is it that you can take away from these 16 years? Or so to what extent do you see this next chapter in your career as an artist, but also as a person, like, you know, like to what extent would it be a continuation, but to what extent, like, how do you see it evolve and change? And what are some of the changes that you're wishing for your community?
Yeah, so how I mentioned, it brought me a lot because I thematize the Orbán's politics. So actually it's kind of a loss to me, you know, that I'm not in the opposition anymore. But it's a funny fact. And yeah, I'm just proud that I'm still doing theater, or I'm still doing arts, because, you know, there have been many points where I thought, okay, maybe I just have to give it up, but I never gave it up. So I think it's a positive thing. But in Berlin now it's especially hard and strict. So, you know, I'm feeling the Hungarian happiness, or the beginning of the happiness as well. But, you know, in Germany, things are just getting very, strange, I would say, regarding the cultural cuts. So there is no money anymore, you know, to do theater as a freelance artist. So yeah, it's a huge question to me. I mean, as an international artist as well. But I do hope that I can work in Hungary. So basically now I have more opportunities in Hungary than in Germany, which is quite funny. And yeah, and sorry, what was the second part of the question? I don't hear you.
Sorry about that. So I'm trying to make this question as specific as possible. Is that, do you see, so one is this, okay, so now that, let's just assume that we will have more opportunities. So what would your dream project or projects look like? What is it that you hope that you can pursue that you could not pursue in the past? And if there's anything specific that that might change for you, or a new, like, for instance, now we don't have to work around censorship, even thematically. So are there any new inspirations that that you would want to work on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm having one kind of dream project, but I cannot tell it. I mean, I'm working on it, and but regarding Hungary. But yeah, I mean, I really hope that that people can get more cultural fundings, and people who are not allowed or were not allowed to work in Hungary, very good directors, very good companies, that they can go back and do something. And I think this period is quite interesting because there is a kind of, happiness and optimism, but, many things were just put under the carpet, many kind of manipulation and, how can we cover the dark spots and whatsoever. So I think, yeah, many Hungarian artists were super scared. I mean, in this 16 years. And, I'm just curious what kind of, new flowers of bravery and free voices can raise. So I'm just curious because it became in the last 2-3 years, I think, very political as well. So more brave, but, so scared still and oppressed. And, many state, and not only in the free groups, but, many state theaters in Hungary just didn't invite very critical artists or, censored texts and whatever. And I think, or, it's kind of shameful a bit to me. And I think it's a very interesting questions, not only, observe it, from the victim's perspective, that we were so oppressed and we wanted to do, our lovely art, because it's not true. I mean, many people were scared and manipulative and, not brave enough and not supportive enough. I mean, for the changes of the government. So I'm a bit critical with it as well.
That is really, actually, that's such an interesting point of like this true confrontation. Let's face who we were during the past 16 years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, that's
how we can look into the mirror, because, many people, I mean, just, and it's quite interesting as well. Many people popped up, after the elections that I was so oppressed, but I've been always brave and whatsoever. And this is not true, literally. So there are many artists and many activists and journalists, who were bleeding out during this regime because they were brave enough to raise their voice. But many people were just weak. And, after this weakness popping up, that, yeah, I'm the new solo leader of the new regime. So it's
I'm
kind
so
of
sorry, I have to interrupt just before
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
But that's, I think you're making such an important point. Mikko, what would be your big dream for this next chapter of our society and yourself?
Yes, one of my dreams is that the independent theater venue is going to function again. They receive support and they will function as culture spaces, and not only for artists but also for the audience, because there was an audience gathered around this form of art, and they disappeared or they get fragmented, and I hope we're going to gain that back. And my another hope is that the independent artists will be not only present but represented. So there are trade unions and professional organizations which are functioning. They are present, but obviously they had no chance for real communication, or of course. So there were no consultations. They could not make proposal or any kind political movement or political act. And now it's changing, and these organizations are working really hard on preparing proposal for different for different fields of theater. And now it's time for us to be represented, and it's time for us to take part in this work and not just waiting for it happening, but also step into these trade unions. And we are, for example, we are organizing as young creators an organization for ourselves where we represent the needs and the proposals of the creators who were born after 89. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's happening now.
It's
Yeah.
very cool. And yeah, and I do want to emphasize that there's something so beautiful about what you're saying, because like something that I think many of you either said or echoed in what you were saying is this, that I'm not in the opposition anymore. But it just shows that right now, like there's this shift of working with working with society, but it doesn't necessarily place you in a political alliance. It's just like positioning yourself differently, and that's so interesting. Veronica and then Zsófi, and I think Zsófi, you'll have the concluding words, but we still have 10 minutes.
Yeah, I pretty much, of course, dream of or agree with all the things the others mentioned before. Maybe what I feel as a dream, I wish for more like flowering of collaborations, because this was also very restricted all the time. Like when you plan a project, let's make a project, and then let's make a project of 2 or 3 people. Maybe that's possible financially, or like that those restrictions will not guide us in our creative processes. I wish for a lot of companies that are already well recognized and beautiful independent theater and dance companies in Hungary for them to be sustainable and to be able to create again new opportunities or collaborations for emerging artists and younger artists, because they need this experience to join things, to not all the time create by themselves something new and feeling lonely with it. I also wish this thing that you mentioned before, that our starting point or reference for creating work is not only coming from opposition or just as a reaction to something we need to face, but something that maybe can come from a different place again, and maybe it can after a while come from a place of joy or a need for unite and not oppose. And I really wish, I think, for a little bit of some fresh air, which I think, if I'm honest, and also these organizations, Mikolt, or these unions mention, I think basic income would be a help for these artists who were in survival mode for 16 years, to have a little bit of air, to be able to a little bit, not all the time in this tension of needing to apply, needing to do, trying to survive this, but a little bit to be able to breathe and to sit with this breath and try to dream really something that is I think the role of the artist, to dream, to create something beyond, and not all the time reacting to oppression. For me personally, I dream of a project, maybe it's not inspired by our new prime minister, but this is a big thing, I think, in his success, that he went around in the country and he went to many places. And me, as a person who is not coming from the capital, I think it's also very important that I'm a little bit disappointed that, of course, in this regime, culture became even more centralized in the capital. And I really wish for projects that are a little bit going more around. And I think I just want to make a big hike and stop in villages and cities and do a pop-up performance, maybe to have a little bit of air also in the country, and not only in Budapest trying to fight, but to get to know each other and to maybe to do something really that creates the communities that are not, they're not gonna let this happen again. I think we also need to work on that, how to hold on to this moment of holding together, celebrating, and how to keep this going on also in communities around. Yeah, I think for me is that.
So the breathing and the so beautiful. Okay, Zsófi.
Yeah. So that was really nice to hear. And what I would add is, yeah, a redistribution, more fair redistribution of the resources, and not only to the big theaters doing traditional theater and about really conservative stuff. I also think that the union work is really important, but also I think that we need to have more fair salaries to be able to do more advocacy work, to be able to do more activist work, because otherwise it eats us up. And we I think that there should be way more a completely new infrastructure around funding, because the artistic process is not compatible with what we have at all. Rolling basis funding system, and also more connection to the countryside, with also progressive performing arts venues that can thrive also there, so that there is a whole like breathing air, artery of the entire country, and then just the whole, and to keep being, and that we don't, and that there's a lot to do, and a lot to talk about in the theater, even if there's a new government and now it's all brighter, but we still need to, there is thousands of things to tackle and to bring into light, that they don't care about still, or that we need to make them aware of.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, so we are coming to the conclusion of this first panel, and I guess what I want to say is I did not curate this panel originally, but I was so excited to have the four of you, and what I would like to say to the audience, whoever come across this video, is that these four artists, so something that we talked about is like reacting to the regime, but what's wonderful about their performances is that they were not only reacting to the regimes, and they had so much integrity and creativity and humor, most importantly, to create performances that were well, delight is a light word, but both delight and brilliance that we've seen. And so I would strongly recommend whoever will come across this conversation in the future to check out the website of the event, because we will have links to trailers, to performances. And despite the challenges, there's so much joy and community. I truly loved attending these performances that you created. So thank you so much. And yay, let's dream big. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our panel. This is a conversation with Hungarian theater artists, theater from the streets after regime change. This is now part 2 of our panel. I will be passing it over to our moderator, Aniko Suches. Please take the floor. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you and welcome. Again, as Penny said, this is the second part of a conversation on contemporary Hungarian theater and performance. Part 1 that you will find on, I think, Hallrand's website was about performance as a site of feminist resistance. And in this second part, we will more focus on artistic companies or collectives. And the title of this session is Care as Practice, Labor, Community, and Artistic Precarity. We will have 3 participants in this panel, and I will individually introduce them. I will also say that I try to shorten the bios a little bit, but I would encourage all of our viewers to eventually go to the events website and do look at these absolutely fantastic bios. And I will also ask the artists to introduce themselves a little bit. So, and we're going to go in alphabetical order. So the first artist I'm going to ask to turn his camera on is Martin Boros, who is an award-winning film and theater director who's currently pursuing his MFA in film directing at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. He's the founder of Stereo Act, a progressive theater collective established in 2013. He has directed 22 original theater productions, including onstage, site-specific opera, and documentary and participatory works. His work has been presented in over 40 cities in 13 countries in Europe and the United States. Martin began filmmaking in 2017. He has since directed 6 short films and a feature-length documentary. His debut feature, Raw Material, received the special prize at the 44th Hungarian Film Festival and is currently streaming on HBO in Europe. Our second panelist will be Marton Illés. If you could turn on your camera, that would be great. Thank you. He's a dramaturg, a playwright, a sociologist, and a trainer. Born in 1980, he graduated as a sociologist and communication expert and a television director. He has written more than 12 plays and directed performances and focuses on contemporary social topics and the challenges of social inclusion. Martin Illés has worked for the Independent Theatre Hungary, an inter-ethnic initiative of Roma and non-Roma artists and educational experts for over 15 years. He has developed numerous international artistic and educational projects, including the Roma Heroes International Theatre Festival, which is the first international encounter of Roma theater artists in the European Union. In addition to his artistic work, his main field is non-formal education that empowers diverse groups in society. And last but not least, our third panelist is Réka Szabó, whose work as a dancer, choreographer, director, and film director led to the foundation of her own contemporary performing arts company, The Symptoms, in 2002, which premiered 45 productions and won numerous Hungarian and foreign awards. Composed of actors and dancers, Szabó's troupe relied on all its members as creative collaborators, each show building heavily on the distinctive personality and imagination of the performers. Szabó perfected blending physical and verbal expressions seamlessly. As the name of the company suggests, the work of the symptoms reflects on the societal and individual symptoms in a timely fashion. Szabó's artistic mission is heavily influenced by her social sensitivity, which helps her to tap into a variety of social relevant issues. She is also a filmmaker, and her films include Movie, Morning, and her full-length documentary, The Euphoria of Being, has won the Critics' Week's Grand Prize for the Best Documentary at the Locarno Film Festival and the Human Rights Award at the Sarajevo Film Festival, among others. And so that's what I'm going to say for now, but now I'm going to ask the artists to share a little bit about their work. The purpose of this first question is really that those who are watching this panel get a sense of who you are as an artist. What kind of works have you been pursuing for the past 16 years? What I'm asking you is to make it specific, make it personal, and try to keep it under 4 minutes. Thank you. Martin, go ahead. We're going to go alphabetical in this first round.
Thank you for the introduction. So I'm a theater and filmmaker, like you said, currently based in New York. I founded Stereo Act and led it for about 11 years. It's a Budapest-based progressive theater collective. My work has mostly existed somewhere between stage directing, documentary theater, or participatory performance, and various public space works alongside film and civic engagement. Stereo Act is not a repertory ensemble, it's more like a project-based artistic platform with a wider circle of different artists, depending on the nature of the given work, actors, musicians, visual artists, dancers, and sometimes non-professional performers, or people with lived experience who often end up on stage in my pieces. We created works in theater spaces and also in site-specific context, outside found locations as well. Many of our works are, or I would say most of our works are post-dramatic, often interdisciplinary, documentary, inspired, devised pieces. And we often have been producing internationally, which is, maybe we will talk about this later, is partly an artistic choice, but also for us, at least, a survival strategy. So we were lucky to produce works apart from European co-productions in the US as well, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in Baltimore, in New York, and in Bath, Maine. And my themes are often shaped by social or political realities, like, just to mention a few, housing crisis of care, education, propaganda, refugee crisis, gender inequality, Roma equality, and a theme that often comes back in my work is the responsibility of the intellectuals, how we, when we enter vulnerable communities. Yeah, and if it's about time, I can wrap it up.
Thank you. Thank you. We can use this time in the next round. Martin, would you just introduce
Hello,
your
everybody.
inspirations and your work? Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. I'm representing the Independent Theatre Hungary, and we've been cooperating with Horrand many times because Horrand is always streaming the online versions of the Roma Heroes International Theatre Festival, which is the first of such initiative in the European Union. So it might be also interesting later on because we are speaking about how it's after the regime in Hungary, but our context is more European level context, so we have also European level issues. But shortly about us, we are an independent theater, which is now already a lot of independent theaters are, but when it was founded almost 20 years ago, then the current independent theaters were called alternative theaters. And actually, this name was given by an audience member who wanted to create a website, which was like a new thing that time, or at least for our company, and it must have had some name. So he figured out to call it Independent Theater Hungary. And it was an initiative of Rodrigo Balog, a theater artist who is also of Roma origin, like many of our organization, because we are an interethnic initiative of Roma and non-Roma theater artists and educators. Who was a kind of fed up that all the Roma characters in drama history, in education, in theater, in media, everywhere are like real assholes, only stereotypical ones, whores, um, whatever, like thieves and so on. Or even if they are not, they are like very much only like victimized and stupid and so on. So and it wasn't really the reality which he experienced and we all experience around us, but we find like different issues, different Roma and non-Roma people, and a lot of current topics which are left out from the mainstream education and culture. So we try to focus on this uh, topics also in our own theater performances. And as so we are really coming from the streets because we never had earlier a place, so we made like many times shows on the streets and walking theater performances, a bit similar like in this thematic like Shakespeare in the Park in New York, that all the scenes are in different spots. And later on, we saw that other Roma theaters are even more isolated and without any support, and we can only reach something together. So then we started to create a network and initiated different projects and also international festivals, first in Hungary, and since then there are also in other European countries. So this is shortly about us.
Thank you. Thank you, Andreka.
Yeah, so hello everyone. Thank you for organizing this discussion. And yeah, I am the oldest guest of this platform, I think. So I have the very long history. And I think it's important to start with that I was young when the socialism was still in Hungary, when the contemporary dance was illegal to do in Hungary, illegal to teach, illegal to learn. And though there were an illegal school, and I attended the school, and I fall in love with contemporary dance. And I think I find this important because I think a lot of people who started their independent performing art career in the 90s in Hungary, as me as well, came from very different areas. For example, me, I attended the university, and I studied mathematics and informatics. So a lot of very different people came, and in a way our wish for freedom embodied, I think, in these actions. Like for me, it was contemporary dance, like yeah. And then in the 2002, we created a company, The Symptoms, and it became a very stable company for over 20 years. And yeah, but I don't want to talk about this. Sorry. I want to talk about what is my motivation to do art. And coming from dance, but I am interested much more in human beings. And after a while, I realized that I don't mind it's the body, it's a word, it's a sound, or whatever the tool of expression I use. I all the time search for a very coherent language for a specific performance. It's all the time. The symptoms has very, very different pieces. I work with actors, dancers, visual artists, musicians, mathematicians, sometimes poet, dramaturgs. And we are circling around the theme all the time, deepening, and somehow we are creating, we are finding together the language of the performance and the format of the performance, which are quite, I trust time, I trust the process. So a lot of times I don't have the aim, I have the motivation when I start to work. And I am the theme or the topic should be very, very important for me personally. And I always work as co-creators with all the performers, because for me it's very important that they feel that it's theirs. The what they are doing on stage, it's also, they have the motivation to do it, you know, it's not my vision. Our pieces are very, I like when it's intellectually and also, how to say, also sensually rich.
Yeah.
With self-irony, with a lot of emotions, playfulness. Yeah, I don't know. They are quite deeply personal and very political a lot of times, in a very personal way.
This is such a great cue for me, because to sort of like to build on actually,
Yes. Okay.
you said so many words that we can actually build on now. I do want to give a little bit of a context, which is that, so we were invited to participate and to talk on this panel because I think there is a larger, I would say, international desire to better understand what it was like to work during the 16, like in an autocratic regime for 16 years. And of course, there is also a desire to understand how we got to where we got on April 12th this year when the election was. And of course, what our hopes are. So so this is these are the larger guidelines for the discussion. And what I'm hoping to do now is to ask you some specific questions with which we can truly understand that how your aesthetics and artistic practices were shaped by the social and political conditions under which you were working, and as well as your communities. So the next question that I would like to ask is really about if you could tell us about, and in this case, I think it's so interesting because 2 out of the 3 participants started to work before the autocratic regime, what Erika even has experience in the late 80s, right? That's when you started to dance, or am I being, yes. So we can compare to different regimes, and I do think that there is a general desire to better understand how your experiences evolved during the past 16 years, and what were some of the specific challenges that you faced. And so, for instance, Rika, you were mentioning, Martin, you were mentioning that you are basically creating device performances. I'm so curious if how your communities changed as the years went by. And in this way, I will invite you to talk about Symptom2Net and the different stages your company went through, and also the independent theater and stereo act. And And I will say that under ideal circumstances, this would be a round table, and we could just kind of interrupt each other and build on what we each are saying. It's extremely difficult in a webinar, but feel free to jump in when you have something to say or you have something to share, please, as if we can be as spontaneous as we can be. So maybe I will ask Martin, can you just start with like, so again, like for you, it was very distinct because you started to create art in 2012 or 13?
My very first piece premiered coincided with the very first month of the Orbán regime in 2010, actually.
Oh, wow.
So I can call myself an Orbán regime baby.
And how did the circumstances evolve for you? And how did your art respond to the circumstances?
That's a tricky question because it's very hard to compartmentalize from like a personal growth and the evolvement or the process, how the regime changed throughout the times. I would say we definitely became more and more political throughout the years, and this is something I observed also among journalists and educators and social workers and basically everyone in the civil society, that it was no longer possible at a certain point just to do your job as what you originally signed up for. So, and that's a very exhausting and suffocating condition. Well, so you start to live with a constant. Go ahead.
Can I just jump in and ask why it became increasingly more difficult to do your job? Like, in what ways did you start to feel that?
Doing art, doing independent art, leading an organization, all of these are increasingly hard in an increasingly toughening regime because it's a slow but long-term erosion of conditions. There is a constant unpredictability. You cannot plan properly. You cannot grow. You cannot build institutions in a healthy way as you would normally do. You're always designing survival strategies instead of artistic strategies, which is already a very malfunctioning personal system or mindset. So they don't even have to ban you directly. It's enough to make your existence very precarious and cut fundings and make the whole decision-making process very opaque and unpredictable and narrowing the numbers of collaborations and possible partners. And yeah, so the exhausting part is that you spend half of your creative energy on damage control instead of creative stuff.
I see. I'm gonna ask Eka to jump in actually, because you
Yeah.
spoke about it so beautifully and eloquently. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's hard to explain if you don't live it through. Actually, my situation was that in 2010, when Orbán became on power, my company had 70, 90 performance per year, had a stable followers, I don't know, 10 members got regular salary. We had a rehearsal space. So this was the situation. And then slowly it was ruined, you know, like the whole thing. It's very, very hard when you face that that you should choose from the 10 members of your company the 2 who cannot get a salary next year, and then in the next year the other 2, and then the other 2. So and but that's only the money part. The thing is that this regime somehow took away from you the some basic normal things like, for example, this kind of thing. If you put your energy, you are talented, you do good work, that you will get your, it will feed you back. Because you just saw that there are next to you loyal people to the regime who are doing very, very bad works, and they got amazing lot of money, you know, and comparing then if to your suffer, it's so unmoral, so ununderstandable that it's you cannot take it, that how is it possible to see very talented people around you to sing, and others who are making quite bullshit, they are just growing, and or you will be not visible because you are on the blacklist. So you don't you are not invited to interviews. You cannot go into the TV, into the radio. Then if you lift your voice, there will be punishment, character killer videos about you. And after a while, somehow you feel that you cannot, there is no sense actually. So there is no sense to say anything, because Fidesz was able to create such a communicational bubble where the facts didn't mean anything. They could spread such lies. Nobody. So it's incredible, you know, like that they made believe more than half of the Hungarians that the Ukraine Russian conflict, Ukraine is the bad person, you know, to say it very simple, that Russia is good and Ukraine is bad, in a country which has that path with Russia. So it's incredible. So there was you didn't feel that there is any sense. It make any sense actually after a while to say anything, because yeah, it's a terrible feeling. It's really processing. We are processing because it made you. It took away your dreams. It took away your creativity. It took away your hope.
Yeah.
I personally, I went very deep, and I saw a lot of colleagues who were in a very, very bad mental state, got into a very, very bad mental state. Please add some other stuff, because I don't know, it's hard to explain, I think, to those who are not
I think you did a good job,
under such circumstances.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job, and especially sort of like illustrating or explaining like the everyday, the affective experience of existing in such a marginalizing and in such a like propaganda, like under the oppression of such a propaganda machine that you're talking about. And something that I would just like to add again, just to contextualize it a little bit to the international audiences, is that what I found fascinating is such a bad word actually, because there was nothing positive about this, is that Hungary, of course, as one of the former Soviet satellite states, it had a long history of creating the sort of like the internal enemies, that so like we need an internal enemy so that the state is fighting back against. And I always sort of reflect on how did independent artists, and then to be fair, there's a history of demonizing independent artists or demonizing artists in general, but what was very sort of palpable during the past 16 years, how independent artists and artists who stood up for what they believed in and wanted to pursue aesthetically, so not even politically, but their curiosities, the kind of curiosities that these three artists were describing, they gradually did become the enemy of the state and sort of like part of this propaganda machine that Rika was describing. So thank you for this. Actually was very interesting. And I want to ask lastly within this round, Marton, how were your experiences as part of the independent theater, and when did you start to face the challenges that this new regime placed in front of you?
Yeah, so we are kind of coming from a different situation. I mean, also independent theater Hungary and also European Roma theaters as general, because we never had like 10 salary peoples and we never had like institutions and Roma artists usually not even accepted to the academies, or if they are accepted, they don't get job afterwards. And only there are two countries in in Europe where such things happened earlier. It was Russia and Ukraine, where there were big Roma theaters state funded. Otherwise, there are no state funded, and there were not. And what was maybe our luck is that we didn't want to be one either. So we didn't apply and didn't accept any support, not even during the Orban regime, but also earlier, because of course, as a private person, I can say a lot of bad things regarding narratives, regarding ruining the society, education, health system, everything about Orban regime, but we shouldn't either make like some kind of pink color in the uh, other political regimes before, because, for example, for Americans, for example, it's like quite impossible to imagine that you call yourself like independent artists, but you expect your 100% money from the state. Because, for example, in the US, it's like 7-10%. And then, for example, earlier the Sundance Festival was contacted by one of the Republican ex-presidents that do you want more money? And they said, no, we don't want more money because we want to stay independent. So we never wanted to get money from the state. But during the last culture minister before Orban regime, the minister himself had the opportunity to decide on half of the culture money. So this can be maybe a good decision. Maybe it can be like, I don't know, aesthetically a nice decision, but it's still not like 100% democratic or equal situation. I think who had like a really bad big challenge is like the absurd theater, because during Orban regime, absurd kind of died, because we also created sometimes some very strange situation, like there were these public workers who were paid for doing nonsense things, but they had to do it and they got their money from the state, so they were totally dependent. And we created, for example, one show that there is a place where they have to scan everything, like scan objects, scan newspapers which are already scanned, and afterwards, in like half year, we just heard that there is such a archive center in one of the countryside towns. This is just one example, but there were so many absurd situations that I think it was like quite hard to find real anything more absurd than reality. But I think it's also important to find like the parallels with the history. So as Rika mentioned also earlier, before the 19th, there was a quite oppressing regime, and you know these patterns usually come back in a society which is used to that. So actually, we are in Eastern Europe kind of used to that. Sometimes some kind of regimes coming, and the friends of yesterday became the enemies of tomorrow, and we are changing the different ism, and but yeah. So it wasn't so much challenging for us because we are always worked from private funds and international funds. And another thing is we always made social and political theater, but not like direct political theater, because we also wanted to reach always the communities, and most of the communities were collected by religions communities in the last 16 years. And for us, it was also important that we can bring workshops and performances to young Roma children and to convince them that they can have also like role models and be active. But then we couldn't be like a very critical and like speak in the media about Orban, because we also needed to go and reach these communities. And I think it's also a responsibility of art, and it was also mentioned in the earlier part, that to reach not only the cities audiences. And I think many times when we are speaking about independent theater, it's only like capital centered, but we should also reach out like other audiences. And when everybody is like a prisoners of the regime, a kind of in the schools, in the church organizations and so on, then you can only reach people if you do a kind of I don't know, kind of not conflicting directly with the power, but you can still do criticism if it's not too much open. So we always made this kind of criticism. That was our opinion, that was our strategy, and we didn't apply for any money. Even when they wanted to give us money, we said no, thank you.
I'll jump in. Reka, do you want to jump in? I'll just quickly say that, so again, giving some context, is that why what Ilyich is proposing is extremely difficult is because Hungary has a really long tradition, and an only tradition, where independent theater company, independent artists create art primarily and most often solely out of state grants. That's and unfortunately the kind of patronage, or the kind of support of corporates, support of wealthy individuals, it doesn't have a tradition of this kind of art support in Hungary. I will say, and I think the three of you can speak more to this, that is something that I've noticed as I've been writing and thinking about independent theater, that many artists and many organizations or collectives or companies were forced to explore ways in which they can apply for European grants that are not necessarily artistic grants, in order to sustain their art too. And it's interesting that we're sitting here, the three of you and myself, and Martin said something that was really important when Martin, you said that, well, art has become increasingly political. It has become more and more explicitly political, and I think we did observe that with many independent artists too. But here, for instance, for me, it's important to point out that I mean, I've seen quite a few of the symptoms, and now the TNET, which now the CNET, which the break. Reka, I will ask you to tell us what happened with the symptoms during the last couple of years. And it was never political. It was, and as Reka herself described her inspirations at the beginning of our discussion, what is so painfully so ironic is that these artists have the most sort of like most in-depth, most universal, most like socially, and of course there is a social and a political reflection or implication, because I personally do not necessarily believe that anything can be not political, but none of the artists here started out with an explicit political agenda. And it is interesting, like this, what Martin was describing, the balancing of how to stay away from politics, and then how there were independent artists and there were theater artists, not just independent, who became increasingly political, as Martin was pointing out during the last couple of years. But Reka, for instance, I don't think that you ever became very political, explicitly political in your art. Have you?
I mean, yeah, I mean,
like party politics?
I usually do, I usually close up a theme much more universal, very personal, digging very, very deep, and find there a common human symptoms. But actually, we did a quite straight political piece when I don't know, in 2019 or something like that, which is the symptoms with small letters. It's about the symptoms of Hungary, and it was a piece about the history of independent art in Hungary from the 90s. And we followed up, it was a kind of documentary line, which followed up all the cultural, the laws, how it changed, how the decisions, the political structure behind, and yeah, and we also told our story, our very personal story of our company. And this was because we felt, and this was quite directly political. I had a scene where Orbán is saying something in a amplifier, and I'm and the amplifier is coming into the front, and I'm screaming and collapsing. So yeah. But mostly we worked a lot. I mean, everything became political in Hungary. Actually, we did a piece about the process of giving birth with 4 dancers who are mothers, with a very physical way to show to how is it, giving birth, the process. And it just was parallel with the we have Agnes Gerib, who is the main character in Hungary, who tried to lead
Giving birth at home, like she was a
giving
doula.
birth at home, and she was putting into jail because. So I don't want to say the whole story, but it was also about how the debates, how the normal debates, the normal conversation about the complex topic couldn't happen in Hungary in the last 16 years. So a piece which was not meant to be political, it became political because through the personal experience of these 4 dancers, it created also a space where we could start to talk about what does it mean, what are the states in these moments. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. And yeah, and the history, yeah, we decided in 2023, so 3 years ago, to hibernate the symptoms. We did a 5 hours ritual in Trafu to say goodbye to our audience. I burnt out totally. And yeah, it's very interesting what happened in the last 3 years, but yeah, I talk too much, so
No,
I give
actually,
the word to the
yeah.
others. I made
Excellent cue.
international projects, and yeah.
Because so we have about 17, 20 minutes left. And so I think that's actually a good direction to go to, which is, so I was going to have 2 more questions, and I want to just throw in both questions, and I'll repeat these questions, of course, if necessary, but I would like to invite you to reflect on whatever you feel you have the most to say, or most interesting things to say. one of them was that it's so interesting that so all three of you work with communities, and as Reka and Mart was describing with Martin, you also touched upon the practice or the process of devising theater, so creating performances with communities. I was going to ask how your communities evolved, and was there an aspect that's like beyond the financial, where it just felt like that it has become increasingly difficult to create these performances because so much depends on what is the energy, what is the curiosity, what is the passion that we're bringing to the rehearsal room. And so I'm very curious if you've noticed any differences there as the years went by, and you've already described the challenges that you were facing. And then a question perhaps combined with that is how could we have taken better care of the communities, or where do you think the independent artists as a community or artists in general could have done a better job? But if you have any insight on that. Yes, so Martin, I'm going to ask you first to reflect on this. And Martin, I'm also very curious how your collaborators have evolved. How we're talking about 16 years, which is many years.
Yeah, I wish I could say something hopeful about this, but I think we were all influenced by how the public language was poisoned completely, and we all experienced. And I can really relate to what the first panelists said and what Reka and Martin are saying, like how this frustration and the hatred in the society, in the everyday public thinking is present, and how are we working inside a society where many people feel that real dialogue is not possible because it's not possible with the policymakers, and it's not possible with the partnering institutions. And just to mention one example, it's very hard to make participatory theater in an environment like this, which is based on or depends on trust and dialogue. So this is just one example to mention. But yeah, I will be very. Go ahead.
I'm going to add a question and an observation here, which is that so what's interesting about the three of you sitting here is that all three of you made some very serious accomplishments. So we know that Stereo Act has a center right now. There you have a building. You built a community there. Fusi Independent Theater too. With Reka, so just to, again for our viewers. So this is a Hungarian, two Hungarian rhyming words. The company used to be Symptoms, which is Tünet, and then there was an announcement, beautiful letter, Facebook, and the event of like the hibernation, and the company became a break, which is Szünet in Hungarian. And then I kept seeing all the incredible projects that you have been pursuing since then. So there's and again, as I said in the other panel, under no circumstances would I want to like fetishize, for lack of a better word, or celebrate precarity, but there is still something that I would love you to comment on, that all of this is happening, how it affects your work. And then maybe I'm adding a third question, just so that we can all reflect on this together before we leave, is that how did the building still come about, or what the building was? And Martin, I jumped in here because as you were saying how negative and how horrible everything was, and yeah, there were people.
I'm not saying that. No, it's just hard to talk about the challenges
yes,
in a hopeful and empowering, encouraging way, because you're asking us about the challenges and what was crippling in a regime like the Orbán regime. That's all I said. I wouldn't have lasted 13 years if there wasn't for any joy or encouragement on the other hand.
Okay, and I might come back to this, what you just finished with. Okay. Martin?
Sorry, I didn't really get maybe the question that about the building we have, or how we dealt with this.
Actually, you know what, something that Martin pointed out, and I think that's a really fair point. There is so I combined two questions that should not be combined, okay? So let's keep them separate. So the first question really was how the community evolved, and what is, like, did you notice any changes within the community of artists? And are there any reflections already that how, what is it that if there's anything that we could have done differently? But more importantly, how the community evolved.
Yeah, when mentioning community, I would mention like this young Roma intellectuals. So I think this community developed a lot. So when we started like 10 years ago, the first festivals and things like this, it was almost just non-Roma who came, only like one, two persons. And now there are already many people who want to come, who pay for the tickets. And I think it's like very important to become like real citizens. I mean, like active citizens who want to connect to their heroes who are on stage. And we also have like already artists, I mean, like directors and actors who we started to work with when they were like 14 years old, and now they are 40 years old or 30 something. So this is something which is developing. I'm not believing so much in this artivism. I mean, I don't think that art should really be like a tool or a toy of any political movement. I don't like any ism. It can be anything, but usually all isms say that we are this and the others are something bad, and they can be different. It can be communism or whatever, or feudalism or feminism, or there is always something which is like a different, and our point of view is more like finding the points of every character. So even if we, I don't know, present a dictator or a very evil director or whatever, we also want to understand his or her point. So I think theater shouldn't be like, a political toy, the toy of the politics. I think the politics should be the toy of theater. So, we can present politicians or people with power. They can be ridiculous, or they can be like vulnerable, or they can be whatever. But I think it's better if we try somehow to questionate people's their own point of view on life, whatever it is. Because if I meet a conservative person, I want to question it about them. If I meet, I don't know, gender fluid, very PC, whatever person, and I want to questionate this thing. So I think we can always questionate our points and try to questionate the others. And I think if the theater does this, then it can have a long-term result. But we will never have such a impact like the mass media. But we can teach people to communicate to each other, to try to cooperate them, to try to say sorry to another person, to try to ask, how did you mean it? And I think that's a lot. And I think you can also do it in a very bad situation. For example, Martin, you mentioned the participatory theaters. We made these participatory theaters in such a very poor villages where never nobody went even to secondary school. And they made a wonderful show in like 1 week because we believed in them, and they felt that they are valuable. And I think if we give to the people that they are valuable, but also the other people are valuable, then they can start to do something with each other.
Rika,
Yeah, I think we all share this. We don't do ism theater. I'm just talking about that Hungary became a country where whatever you do, in a way, it gets a kind of political color, because they will say it's with them or against them. Whatever you say, whatever you do, whatever, yeah. So that's crazy. That was crazy. Yeah, I don't know what to say. So for me, I felt very lonely in the contemporary performing arts scene. And for me, it was quite a big struggle I always felt that we are not able to come together in a way and make radical answers to these radical times. We always just, when they cut the support, and we were crying for cutting the support, and I found this very poor in a way. So because for me, not money was the first, the worst thing, you know. I didn't feel only as an artist terrible in Hungary. I felt terrible because I am in my country, and this happens in my country, and that was unbearable. And lot of people committed suicide or became very, very ill mentally. It's yeah. And I wanted to say that what community became for me very, very important in the last 3 years. I made 2 international projects, and both of them I'm very proud of, because one of them was about we made an announcement for civilians who lost their vacation in Hungary for some reason. And here a lot of so you should understand that in Hungary all the intelligence were humiliating in the education, in the health system, and so on. Lots of people had to choose to accept these humiliating circumstances or leave their vacation, which is part of their identity, not only a job. And we found, 12, we chose 12 civilian people, and we created a piece about this grief. What does it mean? About their stories and about their emotions and so on. That was one project, and this community is still together. So it became a very, very strong community. And in the other project, we created an inclusive group of dancers, young dancers. They are all with how to say, so fogyatékkal
disabled, both, yeah, I've seen
disabled
that.
and
like somewhere, yeah, physically or mentally, yeah.
Yes. And it also became an amazing community, and I also will put there some trailers about these projects, if you don't mind, in the chat, so you can watch it. And also I'm organizing a regular training, which are very, very popular. And there is also a community who are there for years now. So I started to believe really to build this kind of communities with work and or projects, and I try to maintain it in a way.
Okay, thank you. So because of time, I'm going to jump in because we have very little timeline. I would like to end with, I would love to hear from all three of you, what is the next big project for you? And it's for this is individual, so it can be tied into your company, or it might just be your own project, but what's your next big project that you are excited about and excited to pursue? If it relates to the fact that in Hungary there has been this monumental, hopefully it's going to be a monumental change, that's great, but just tell us what's the next big project for you. Maybe Márton, would you start now? Yeah.
The next big project. So we have a lot of plans now. We would like to focus on. We made now a project on rural communities, rural self-representation, and bringing performances to small villages where never was any theater performance. And now we would like to do it with skilled workers because they are also kind of marginalized and during the socialism they were the heroes, but now they are more treated like losers. And about their stories and bring it to them. So this is like one topic. Another thing is the multi-identities because we are many times thinking of somebody, I don't know, as a director or Roma or LGBT or whatever, but actually most of the people have a lot of identities and how these can relate to each other because the different identities and groups related to the different identities many times are not so much okay with each other. So, yeah, for example, these two topics are important for us now.
Thank you, Martin. What's next for you?
Next for me is to figure out how I can work in Hungary again, in theater or film, which is one of my biggest hopes, without feeling that the project has to happen against the system. And yeah, I hope for Hungary that there will be workshops where or places where people can research and grow in a sustainable way. And a little more personal is that soon before I relocated to New York, I handed over Stereo Act and Stereo Workshop, which is a community cultural hub in one of the very vibrant and international districts of Budapest, that it will live and develop further. It personally makes me very happy that after I handed it over to my long-term colleagues and friends, it's still thriving and in many aspects in a much better way than if I had stayed there. So it's like for me next is to still observe it developing, and I just really enjoy being a fan for them.
Enrica, are you back to symptoms?
Yeah, I'm 57. I'm sitting on the ruins of Orbán regime, and I am still searching for what is my role now, and do I have the passion and the power and the creativity still to restart in a way, building up a community around me, an artistic group of people. And yeah, what I've been doing a project with a young dancer now for half a year. I am in a discussion with her. She's a very talented, very beautiful young dancer. And we created a duet, or we are on the creation process, but maybe it will be all the time a creation process, a never ending performance, just work in progress all the time. It's about these questions. What is the role of an artist today? You know, what is the knowledge of contemporary dance? This is a very important question now for me, and how the knowledge of contemporary dance could inspire the whole Hungarian society, because I really believe that there is a very, very deep knowledge in this form. But also I have ideas in my mind. I find very interesting what's going on now in Hungary. What does it mean to, how can you handle a situation, a moment like this, you know, like when you have the power to remake a system, rebuild a system with all its serious questions. So maybe I will start a project. I haven't decided yet.
Yes, thank you so much. So I do want to thank all three of you for joining us. It's getting, actually, here in Budapest, it's getting very late. So really appreciate that you stayed with us so long. And I do want to say that all of the incredible works that these artists have produced or their companies have produced will be hyperlinked. So you can at least look at the trailers through this event's website. I know that the Euphoria of Being is such a beautiful film. Please go and see it. Raw Material is same, and the Roma heroes are in that's a volume of plays that's translated into English. So do seek out these artists, because I love the diversity that we brought, and what I mean by the diversity, the different genres, the different scopes, the different very distinct aesthetics that you're working with, and they are accessible to international audiences. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of the Gilder-Coigney International Theatre Forum and New Perspectives Theatre Company, I wanted to extend my deepest thanks to our incredible artists for sharing their experiences, insights, and work with us. Thank you as well to our moderator, Dr. Eniko Suchez, for guiding the conversation with such care, thoughtfulness, and expertise. Thank you. Wonderful. A special thank you to our partners at HowlRound Theatre Commons for helping us bring this discussion to an international audience and ensuring that this conversation will remain accessible to viewers around the world. If today's discussion resonated with you, we encourage you to continue exploring the work of these artists. Additional bios, links, and resources can be found on the New Perspectives Theatre Company website. We also invite you to join the Gilder-Coigney International Theatre Forum, a free international platform connecting theater artists, scholars, activists, and cultural workers from around the world. Register, introduce yourselves, and let us know what's happening in your corner of the globe. We can't wait to hear from you. Be sure to explore the Theater from the Streets archives on YouTube and learn more about the international conversations that help inspire today's gathering. Follow us on social media and stay connected to hear more about future panels, opportunities, and resources in international conversations. We are NPTC Theater for New Perspectives Theatre Company, and the Gilder-Coigney International Theatre Program is GC International Theatre, a project of New Perspectives Theatre Company. This is only the beginning. There is so much more to come. Thank you again to all the artists, to everyone who was a part of today, and for being a part of this community. I am Penelope Rose Nasruddin, Program Manager of the Gilder-Coigney International Theatre Forum, signing off. Take care, stay connected, and keep making theater. All the best.